I'd love for folks to take their seats. We have one more portion of our P28 dinner. And I'd love for folks to sit down. We'll get started. And then after this, you can talk all you'd like right behind that curtain. Okay. As I said at the start of the evening, Politico did things differently this year with our list because of forces too hard to ignore. So we wanted to give you all a better sense of how these forces operate and put some things into perspective. So who better to do that than Politico's founding editor and global editor-in-chief, John Harris, and he will be joined once again by Dasha Burns, Politico's White House bureau chief. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage for a conversation. Welcome, John and Dasha. It's great to have you here on stage. And this is just a little conversation to take folks behind the scenes a little bit. And I'd like to start with Dasha. Yeah, I know. But I think you can handle it. Dasha, we'd love to know, and I think folks in this room would like to know, what is it like to cover this administration? What does this room need to know about the Trump administration?
It's a great question. It's very strange to be on the other side of the interview dynamic. Look, there's covering the Trump administration, and there's sitting across from the president in a moment like this. I will say this is an administration unlike any other. This is a moment unlike any other. And as a journalist in this time, one of the most difficult things, and Carrie, you know, our newsroom, John, we talk about this all the time, how to prioritize in a complete fire hose of news, how to figure out what is the story? And in an interview with the president, we had 45 minutes, which is a lot of time, but for this administration, there's only so much you can cover in 45 minutes from someone who has made such dramatic changes, has made such dramatic departures from past people who have sat behind that resolute desk in the Oval Office. So that's one of the biggest challenges. But I will say one of the most fascinating things is this president's accessibility to the press, how much he does just say what is on his mind, and anyone that covers him falls often into the trap of trying to sort of psychoanalyze the president. But what his advisors tell me all the time is he pretty much does just say what he thinks and what he feels in that moment, which is why what he said to me earlier this week was so striking.
And what is striking about covering this president, he's very accessible. We have multiple reporters in Washington who call him up on the phone. Multiple reporters in any week, and he picks it up. It's one of the sort of great mysteries.
That's one question I didn't have time to ask him, but I've called him on the phone. He picks up and he tells me what he's thinking in that moment. Sometimes it's a 30-second call. Sometimes it's several minutes. And I wanted to ask him, why do you pick up the phone?
Why do you pick up the phone?
Didn't get to that. The global events and world peace took precedent.
So I want to turn to John. And John, if you don't know, has covered Washington for many, many years. He's one of the great journalists in terms of covering the U.S. politics. John, I'd love to hear from you. How different is this administration from others in terms of how they operate? What is normal? What is not?
Carrie, it's a question I think about all the time. And if you'll allow me just for one quick second to exercise founder's prerogative and say something about Politico. Before there was even a name for Politico, there was only an idea. There was an ambitious, young, clearly talented reporter from Philadelphia who back in the early days said, I want in. That person is Carrie Brown. She is a Politico original, and her return to the city is such a big thing. There's nobody that understands the city and Politico together as well as you,
Thank
Karen.
you. Thank
and
you, John. Thank you.
It is a sign of our commitment to the city and the important work that is done here.
Thank you, John.
With
Now answer my question.
Now, with respect to that, there's some things that are so normal about it. Like they get, on the left wing, they get mad the way any normal president would. It's not that different than the bros around Obama that you dealt with,
Yeah.
or the super sensitive people who are around President Biden, or all the way, my perspective goes all the way back to Clinton. And so that part is normal. The part that is not normal is this president in the second term has been so fused with, I'd say, ideological purpose, in some extent psychological purpose. He wants payback for the things that were done with him. It's a radical presidency that I don't think I have any frame of reference for in the, I guess, the 30-some years I've been doing it.
Yeah. So to that, I think this brings us to a good point. We're going to take a look at a short portion. Josh is going to have to listen to herself, a short portion of this interview with President Trump. I think a part of it that frankly didn't get a ton of attention, and then we'll dive more into what he said. Take a look at the...
So Politico has named you as the most influential person shaping Europe as part of our annual Politico 28 list. Past names that have topped the list include President Zelensky, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and President Viktor Orban. This year, Politico broke precedent to recognize an American for the first time in the decades-long history of P28. And sir, there is no question that you are having a seismic impact on the continent and its politics. One of the most pressing issues in Europe right now is the war between Russia and Ukraine. Your team has been going back and forth.
I wouldn't say one, I would say the most.
The most, you're right. Your team has been going back and forth between Putin and Zelensky with various drafts of a peace deal. Which country right now is in the stronger negotiating position?
Well, there can be no question about it. It's Russia. It's a much bigger country. It's a war that should have never happened. Frankly, it wouldn't have happened if I were president, and it didn't happen for 4 years. I watched that taking place, and I said, wow, they're going to cause some problems here. And it started, and it could have evolved into World War III, frankly. I think it's probably not going to be happening now. I think if I weren't president, you could have had World War III. I think you would have had a much bigger problem than you have right now. But right now, it's a big problem. It's a big problem for Europe, and they're not handling it well.
Last night, you said that you weren't sure if President Zelensky was fine with the most recent proposal, that he isn't ready. I was hearing from your advisors around Thanksgiving that they thought this thing might be wrapped up by the end of the holiday, but it's still not done. Is Zelensky responsible for the stalled progress, or what's going on there?
Well, he's got to read the proposal. He hadn't he hasn't read it yet.
The most recent draft.
That's as of yesterday. And maybe he's read it over the night. It would be nice if he would read it. You know, a lot of people are dying, so it would be really good if he'd read it. His people loved the proposal. They really liked it. His lieutenants, his top people, they liked it. But they said he hasn't read it yet. I think he should find time to read it.
Is it time for Ukraine to hold an election, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a long time. It hasn't been doing particularly well. Yeah, I think it's time. I think it's an important time to hold an election. You know, they're using war not to hold an election, but I would think the Ukrainian people would, should have that choice, and maybe Zelensky would win. I don't know who would win, but they haven't had an election in a long time. You know, they talk about a democracy, but it gets to a point where it's not a democracy anymore.
Thank you. Thank you for sticking with us, guys. What was interesting there is that I think we did see a day later, President Zelensky did respond to President Trump and put forward an idea about holding elections again. What surprised you, or did he say anything in the entirety of this interview? What stuck with you?
I think the bluntness, the candor, and I'd say aggressiveness with which he painted Europe as a whole, and also how starkly he said there, yeah, Russia has the upper hand. He said that multiple times in the interview, and for him, there's not a morality to a lot of these policies when it comes to how he deals with foreign. It's not about should the U.S. do this out of the sort of goodwill. It's about brass tacks for him, and he makes that very clear. I'm also though consistently surprised. We've been talking for months. Is he going to walk away from this? And he hasn't. And I'm surprised both in this interview and over the course of covering him in this first year of his second term, how committed he has been both to this conflict, to what's going on in Gaza, to now the action we're seeing in Venezuela, all around the world. And I was actually speaking with our one of our next speakers, our final speaker, about how the amount of time that he now spends thinking about his legacy and how much he sees his footprint around the world as a piece of that. It is surprising to me, but I think that what happened to him in Butler, Pennsylvania, frankly, was the first moment that I ever saw in covering Trump of him seeing his morality and his what his life and legacy could really mean. And I think that's had a huge impact on how he is conducting himself in this term.
I would note for this audience, we both worked at NBC News during that attempt, the assassination attempt, and Dasha was on the scene that day and broadcast live from Butler, which obviously was an extraordinary moment in so many ways for the country and for the journalists there. Scary.
It's a moment that I think has been overlooked in a lot of ways, and because so much has happened since, but that for the president and for his team has really cemented a lot of his worldview and approach this time around.
John, last question. What, tell us, particularly for people sitting here in Europe, what should they take away from what the conversation has been this week, and frankly, for many months, this whole year? Tell us, what should this audience take away from what we're seeing?
Well, I think one thing that is true of dealing with President Trump is that he is transactional. He's interested in leverage. So your question to him about who's got leverage, he just gave you a very matter-of-fact answer as to how he sees it. It wasn't necessarily grounded in the right and wrong of what's going on. It's about leverage. And to some extent, that depersonalizes it. And even with respect to you and Politico, look, a month ago or a couple months ago, he was scolding you on Air Force One.
Air Force One.
Well, I'm not going to talk with you. You're with Politico. Then
she asked too many questions.
And then not long after that, he's giving you 45 minutes of incredibly newsworthy interview. So, look, he lives in the moment, and I would say, and he's concerned above all with leverage, and probably that's a useful lesson, I think, for anybody who's on the other side of the table with him, and as in many instances European policymakers are. It's this form of business. One little behind-the-scenes thing I think is interesting. I was reminded of it looking at the video with the flags. We were going to have this interview set up. The flags were going to be behind President Trump. When he walked into the Roosevelt room, with no explanation, he said, "I want to sit there." Where Dasha was going to sit.
Seats,
and so he insisted on a switch. There was a switch. It wasn't clear why, but he said, "Well, I want to show the Politico is an all-American publication." Actually, yes, and we're a global publication, and proudly so. I think actually what he was really trying to do was mix things up, throw you off a little bit. He always is looking for the upper hand, leverage. That's the key with President Trump.
And
leverage.
the interesting behind-the-scenes thing is, he's a showman, and the way he conducts himself in front of the camera versus behind the camera can be a little bit different. He knows the audience that he's playing to very well, and that's one of the reasons he's been such a successful politician.
Yeah, once a TV producer, always a TV producer. All right, well, thank you so much, John and Dasha, for bringing us those insights from Washington. Please help me thanking John and Dasha.
Thank you.
All right, and finally, let's turn our gaze back to Europe. Our next guest and our final guest is an economist, a political and human rights activist, and the widow of Alexei Navalny, whose death in 2024 deprived Russia's opposition of its most charismatic leader. He had been serving a sentence of more than 30 years behind bars on charges that he and the EU denounced as politically motivated to suppress his criticism of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Yulia Navalnaya carries on his work. Applause for John. Yulia Navalnaya carries on his work describing her movement as, quote, pro-European. But what does a European path actually mean? we are pleased to welcome Yulia Navalnaya in conversation with Politico's executive editor in Germany, Gordon Rapinski.
Yulia, it's an honor to be on stage with you tonight. The moment the world saw you on a big stage for the first time, that was Munich last year. And I think many of us, maybe all of us, will remember that moment as one of very, very deep intensity. And I was in the room and I remember you said the words that President Putin will not run Russia forever. And the Russian population needs hope and a perspective. How do you see that today?
The last time is over here.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here on this event, great event, by the way. I think that taking into account my role now and things what I'm doing, it's very important to have hope in general. I think that it's like, our job responsibility to hope, to believe, and to go forward for this. I really have big hope on Russia. I understand that it's a very difficult moment. It's a very difficult moment for all the world. It's a very difficult moment for Europe. And of course, it's awful time for Russia. But still, as I said, it's very important for me to continue my husband's work. Because he was a person who wasn't full of energy. He was full of life. So you can be full of energy today and not full of energy tomorrow. But he every day showed me for many years that never give up. Every day he invented something new. Every day he was trying to show people inside country that we must fight, we must invent something, we must go to the streets, and he was really the best in it in the last decade.
When we look at Russia today, we see a country of enormous repression and a extremely difficult situation for the population. How do you think we can spread hope, or you can spread hope to the population when they are so much full of fear of the government?
You are absolutely right that Russian people who are against war and against Putin are living in fear that they can go to the street and be arrested just for the words. It's very difficult, of course, to understand it sometimes. But still, as I said, it's very important for me to be this person, to show people inside Russia, outside, to people who left the country and start their new life in different countries all around the world, that if I don't give up, after everything what happened in my life, after awful tragedy what happened in my family, that if I have some strength and power to continue to stand on Alexei's place, to do some new projects, to fight with Putin as much as we can. So everybody, I think, can.
You're obviously in touch with a lot of young Russian people who have to make a choice how they act in this situation, if they dare to be resistant or if they leave the country, or all these situations. What do you think? What's the overall feeling that you get when you talk with these people?
I think you came right to the right person. It's me, because, for example, my husband was sentenced to prison, and it was one of the accusations to him that he involved young people in politics. Really, he was sentenced for this. For many other criminal cases, but also for this one, because he was the best in involving young, old people. It's not about just young people. But even now, I can see that a lot of Russian young people against this regime. Of course, the problem is that For example, my daughter, she's 24, and she all her life, she lives when Putin is president. And that's awful. We are speaking not about young people, teenagers. We are speaking about people who are now 25, and they never saw different president. They never seen different people in power in Russia. But a lot of them understand what's going on. I'm in touch with these people. They, for example, I did a kind of new project. I asked Russian people to write me letters. And I just asked them 2 weeks ago, and I got more than 2,000 letters. And it gives me hope. Mostly these people who write me these letters, they are young people. And to tell the truth, I was a little bit surprised that a lot of young people want to write me, and they are writing mostly 80%, even more, from Russia. And they understand what's going on, and it gives me hope as well, of course.
And would you recommend them to be resistant openly?
I would recommend to everyone inside Russia, here in Europe, all around the world, to people to be resistant, to believe in their beliefs, to believe in their values. I think it's the best thing what you can do for your relatives, for your friends, for people with whom you work, to show that you can do this, and they understand that they are not alone. You know, it's very difficult to do something when you are alone. But when you have a lot of people around you, or somebody one stand up the first. So it's much easier to follow this.
You never chose that role that you're having now. You fell into it almost from a moment to the other. And I assume you would have much preferred to stay in the role that you had before, but now you own it and you embrace it. Was that a decision that you took deliberately, or was that something that was just consequential from
You're
what you
absolutely
experienced?
right. Thank you for that you're following my life. You mentioned Munich. At that moment, when I came to the stage, I just realized that I want to do everything for my husband's legacy, and it's very important for me, of course, personally, for future of Russia. I have children. They are not, of course, living now in Russia, but they are dreaming to come back to Russia. And to make this day as close as possible, to work on this, to do sometimes not a lot of, not something tremendous, but to do every day something. It's very important for me. And at that day, really in Munich, I decided that I will continue the work which Alexei had been doing for so many years.
If Alexei would be among us tonight, what would be his message to this room?
Well, I would love you all met my husband. He was really somebody. And I think that after what happened with us, you think that we had very tough life. Probably we had this life, but thanks to him, this life, from other hand, was very, very easy, because he was very easy man, very funny man, very charismatic man. That's why I think that some of you, of course, have already heard these words. Just don't give up. Just believe in your values and go to the right direction.
Yulia. Yulia, I don't think from my part much more words are needed in this interview. I thank you so much for your optimism, for your courage, and for the power that you speak up, not only tonight, but always again and again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gordon and Ms. Navalnaya. It's a great way to end the night. And thank you all so much to all of you for joining us this evening. We know we've given you plenty to consider as we head into 2026. We'd like to thank our presenting partners for making tonight possible, FPIA, EQT, and GSMA. And thanks to everyone for joining us online and to the entire crew for making this night possible. Those of you in the room, if you'll turn around to the back, you'll see a cocktail reception that we invite you to come and enjoy with our special thanks to our networking partner, General Catalyst, and our drinks partner, Beam Suntory. And with that, I thank you all again for being here. Have a good night and enjoy the after party.